Hi. So how much, is this a room full of people who have an active interest in Burning Man? And I can't see you at all. Okay, I have to check. That's great. I heard a lot of people sounding very doubtful at the premise that it hasn't changed. But it hasn't. I've been going for 20 years, and the book has been out for 10 years. It's the 10th year anniversary of the book. And the public conversation about Burning Man, and why you should care about it, by the way, if you're not someone who's been and knows if you care or don't, is that it is one of the most prominent examples of a bohemian art/business success story in American culture over the last 20 years. It began literally not unlike something like this. It was just something that a couple of friends decided to do and invite some friends of theirs. It had a little bit of an art aspect, a little bit of a ritual aspect to it. It started with 8 people on a beach burning a little wooden statue, and 28 years later, it's a multi-million dollar business drawing 70,000 people paying extraordinarily high ticket prices to be in one of the worst places you could possibly want to be on Earth. And it's extraordinary, and it was not designed to be that. That was not the plan. You know, it was 8 people burning a statue on the beach. People found it interesting. More people came. The cops told them they couldn't be on the beach anymore. They went to the desert. Things started getting expensive. They started all pitching in. Then they're like, it's not just us anymore. There's these people we don't know. We need to make them contribute. We need to sell tickets. For many years after that, there wasn't really a way to make people pay for tickets. If you hadn't been there before 1997, you didn't experience that. But prior to 97, you just sort of knew that you went to the Black Rock Playa, you got off at a certain exit, you had these sort of vector directions, and if you wanted to, you went to the place where there was a trailer and you showed them your ticket, and then they told you better directions about how to actually find the encampment, because it was way deep out there. If you didn't want to and you wanted to take your chances, you try. But since 98, the event formed the shape that it has now. If you've been there, it's a zoned city. You can't just camp wherever you want. It has the same shape. It has the same ethos. It sort of had the pretense, since a Wired magazine cover story in 1996, of being the new American holiday, and I think it's very much succeeded in making that pretense real, and that's the heart of why I say it hasn't changed at all. I think it actually has become an American ritual, not unlike Halloween, Christmas, or Mardi Gras. It's celebrating a particular element of the human spirit, sort of creativity, revelry, wild play, in an environment that's the same, looks the same. I mean, if you've not been going for a long time, you might not believe me, but it's true. I mean, people, they look the same, and they act the same, and the art kind of looks the same if you've seen it for a while, and people have realized you can propel flammable gases through nozzles and light them in various different ways. And in saying all this, like, I'm not trying to be dismissive. I'm actually trying to celebrate what they've managed to do. And they didn't do it by force. They just sort of created this space and this ethos, and people have chosen to inhabit it. And they've liked it, and they became acculturated to it, and they keep acting the same way. The dilemma that's faced this bohemian art business as it's grown is that, well, there's 2 levels to the dilemma. One level of the dilemma, you could say, is that they've developed an audience of bitter, jaded old-timers who like to complain. And I think that is part of the problem. But if you can look at it the other way and say, no, the problem is that they've developed an audience of people who are just coming to consume the experience rather than to help create it. Sort of built into it from the beginning, you know, one of the earliest sort of slogans attached to it was no spectators, the notion that we're all here creating this city of art and innovation, and we're not just supposed to be sitting in a trailer and paying people to feed us. And that's true, that was part of the ethos. But what I maintain, and I ended up having to tell this to the New York Times, which was another interesting thing about how, not how Burning Man has changed, but how the world's relation to Burning Man has changed. You know, when I was trying to sell the book 10 years ago, hardly anyone in New York cared about it. And the only reason I got the book published at all was because it ended up on the desk of a young editor who had just come back from her first Burning Man. And interestingly, right before my book was published, she decided to quit publishing, and she is now a professional fire dancer in Stillwater. That's what Burning Man does. So, but anyway, now, like literally every single little thing about Burning Man gets stories in the New York Times, and I get quoted in them occasionally because I wrote this book. And the big thing this year was there's a bunch of rich tech billionaires there, and their friends, and they're just paying other people to take care of them, and they're living in their little gated communities, and that's all true. But the reason why I say that has not changed Burning Man is because if you weren't reading this story in the New York Times, and I think I told the New York Times guy this self, you wouldn't, as someone going to Burning Man, have any reason to know that any of that was happening. I mean, maybe you're walking down a back street and you see, oh my gosh, there's this giant square of RVs and I don't know what's going on in there. Oh well, whatever. Maybe someone you're meeting out on the open playa is a billionaire. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're an asshole. Maybe they're not. I can tell you there have always been assholes there. You know, it didn't just start recently. So the core of the experience for anyone going there, to me, is exactly the same by design. Like whatever it is you ever got out of being there, the chance to make something, the chance to collaborate with people, the chance to interact with people on this level of social freedom and looseness that you don't tend to find in everyday life, the chance to enjoy that environment, the chance to rebuild your structure after it got knocked down in a dust storm. Like all of that is still there for you. And if you're actually worried and eaten up inside at the thought that somewhere back there's someone being fed lobster that you're not eating, you know, that's almost, maybe you're the one not doing Burning Man right as opposed to them not doing Burning Man right. But I wanted to quickly sum up a few. I used to have a presentation that included 10 lessons from Burning Man. I'm not going to hit all 10, but I do want to hit 4, which I think are relevant to anyone trying to build a bohemian culture into something, not necessarily a giant business that's earning millions, so that would be nice, obviously, maybe, but just something that has room to grow. And one of those lessons is that what you're doing can't be secret. And that, I think, has been one of the attitudinal problems in Burning Man all along, is people have, a lot of people have always felt like, we don't want people to know about this. Like, don't publicize it, don't. Oh, if they see a commercial that's clearly set on the playa or using some sort of Burning Man imagery, like even though it's not shot at Burning Man, it aggravates them. They feel like their mojo is being stolen. And if you create a mojo in the world, like you shouldn't look at it as being stolen. You know, if people take it, if it starts to influence the culture at large, even if it's commercial culture, that's fine. Like that's what you're doing it for. You're doing it. Whatever it is you're doing it because you want people to understand, appreciate, see, and feel that. Like, you can't treat it as a secret, and one of the effects of that is that rich people might come and stay in RVs, but that's going to be okay. Another important lesson when you're starting something, and maybe you want it to grow, or maybe you don't want it to grow, but the point is, you don't know what's going to happen. I mentioned this earlier, and I think it's important to stress to people who come into Burning Man now. It's like, this was not the idea. It was not, someone didn't come up with the idea, I'm going to create a giant hipster theme park in the Black Rock Desert, and I'm going to make the people who buy the tickets build all the attractions. Like, that wasn't the idea. It evolved and grew, and no one could have expected it to become what it is, and you need to allow room for whatever thing you're making to become, not so much what you want it to be, but what the people who chose to be attracted to it want it to be. And the third lesson following that is that optimism is necessary. It's a very powerful tool. This applies to Burning Man writ large and to every single little thing that happens in Burning Man. Whatever project, theme camp, art project, everyone I've been involved with has always shaken me up, because I'm a very controlling person, and I don't like coming into things like not knowing how it's going to work. Like, how are we going to do this? I don't know. We're gonna say this is going to happen, and we're going to make it happen. And shockingly, for someone with my personality, it almost always happens. And so you have to believe it's going to happen and leave room for it to happen. And the the last lesson, and this ties into. You want to do this one? Okay.
Something's happening!
Yeah. The last thing, and this ties into what I was saying before about the jaded old-timers, is if you're trying to do something in the world, do not listen to bored people. And I think that is... Seriously. I've been going for 20 years, so I think I've earned the right to say that. Like, it's the sort of paradox of people who complain that Burning Man has changed. First of all, if you're able to say that, that means you've been doing it for a long time, right? And if you've been doing it for a long time, then obviously you've changed, and also obviously inserting yourself into an experience that it feels transformative the first few times, and it's meant to, but also it kind of is the same. It is a ritual, and it is a holiday, and it feels the same, and it looks the same, and it's in the same place. To me, it's like, well, remember how Christmas felt when you were 6, and then remember how Christmas felt when you were 16, and then, goodness sake, how it felt when you were 26 if you do it for 20 years. Like, if you're convinced that it's gotten awful or boring or whatever, it's like, I'm not saying you've become boring and awful, but let's just say that, consider that maybe it's just time for you to step out of the experience rather than tell other people it's not good anymore, because it's still really good. I'm not here to advertise for the event. It's very expensive, but if you can't afford it, I still think it's fun, and I thank you for listening to me talk about it. And I will have copies of my book here later if any of you want to read it. It's the first history of the event. It's 10 years old, so it stopped 10 years ago, but it's around, and thank you very much for listening.